Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony, which represents the composer's first extended musical expression of the doom he believed an inexorable fate would bring to him, was written in 1877 during a period of grave personal crisis. Although his personal attitudes regarding his homosexuality were benign, the growth of his professional status during the 1870s markedly increased his worries about the consequences that could result from the exposure of his sexual orientation to the public. His fears were well-grounded. Documented bans on homosexuality in Russia existed as far back as the 1600s, and this type of repression, reinforced by the power of the Russian Orthodox Church, was taken for granted under the Tsars. Seeking a way out, Tchaikovsky developed what he believed to be a viable plan, which he revealed to his brother Modest in a letter he wrote in mid-October of 1876. "You say that one shouldn't give a damn about gossip. This is true only up to a certain point. There are people who cannot despise me for my vices simply because they began to love me when they didn't know that I was in fact a man with a lost reputation. For instance, this applies to our sister. I know that she guesses everything and forgives everything. Many other people regard me in the same way. But do you really believe that the consciousness that they pity me is not painful to me when, at bottom, I am guilty of nothing? Is it not terrible that people who love me can sometimes be ashamed of me? This has happened 100 times and will happen 100 more. In a word, I should like by marriage or by a generally open liaison with a woman to stop the mouths of contemptible creatures whose opinions I do not in the least respect, but who could cause distress to people close to me. I won't do this hastily, and I do not intend to take a yoke upon me. I shall only enter into a legal or extramarital union with a woman if I can fully guarantee my peace and freedom." With serendipitous efficiency, the opportunity for Tchaikovsky to realize his plan appeared just 6 months later. In early April of 1877, he received a letter from a 28-year-old conservatory student named Antonina Milyukova, in which she confessed to a long-held, passionate attraction to the composer. Instead of turning aside what was essentially a starry-eyed fan letter, Tchaikovsky began a correspondence with the young woman that moved the relationship forward, albeit on two different planes. Within a month, his letters were including warnings of the "be careful what you wish for" variety, in which he spelled out his principal requirements for a marriage: a completely platonic relationship, total acceptance of the primacy he gave to his work, and unquestioning tolerance of his constitutional irritability. They met for the first time on the 1st of June. 3 days later, Tchaikovsky made a formal marriage proposal. The wedding took place in Moscow on July 18, 1877. Predictably, the marriage was a disaster, lasting only 11 weeks, half of which Tchaikovsky spent at his sister's home in the Ukraine, 550 miles away from his new wife. On October 6th, he fled for good, spending the next 8 years traveling abroad. The period surrounding the collapse of Tchaikovsky's marriage and his confrontation with the reality that he would always feel fundamentally estranged from society would be the most traumatic of the composer's life. Yet 1877 was also a year of great creative fertility for Tchaikovsky, producing both the Fourth Symphony and his opera Eugene Onegin. And while it's clear that the symphony became the primary expressive outlet for his emotional torment, the work doesn't trace his recent experiences through a specific quasi-literary narrative, and thus differs from the program music of Berlioz and Richard Strauss. Although Tchaikovsky wrote up an apparent blow-by-blow description of the piece to satisfy a patron, the programmatic elements in the Fourth Symphony are actually more abstract, as he explained in a letter to a colleague. "My symphony is, of course, programmatic, but the program is such that it's impossible to formulate in words. Such a thing would provoke ridicule and laughter. But isn't this what a symphony ought to be? Shouldn't it express everything for which there are no words, but which gushes forth from the soul and cries out to be expressed, as in Beethoven's Fifth? This is understood even without a program. Thus, the Odyssey depicted in the Fourth Symphony isn't understood logically, but rather intuited and felt. From the fatefully dramatic first movement, through the Andante's desolate lyricism, the tipsy joviality of the scherzo, and the hard-won elation of the finale, this symphony doesn't describe a journey, it is the journey, a pilgrimage of the psyche made compelling through Tchaikovsky's artistic genius, emotional vulnerability, and deep humanity.